Hi everyone, this is Jonathan here, and for those watching after the event, thanks for watching the video, or those joining live. I really appreciate you joining and giving up your time. I hope I won't take up too much of it, but this is going to be about my view of the people side of Powered by Change, and in fact, even if you haven't read the book, I wanted to give you a really super quick overview of the reasoning behind how Powered by Change actually kind of works. And I don't know if Chris, if you can just put me in a little private message to say if you can see this slide, because I'm concerned that after last time I just want to make sure that we definitely can see. Good, everyone can see the slides. Thanks, Arnold. So Powered by Change is a collection of 4 blades of a windmill. And it is an observation of everything that I've seen in the last 20, 30 years of business. And we covered the purpose part prior to this last week, which is the first part of the book. And unlike the new fashionable versions of what purpose is and the start with why, my version of purpose is actually starting with who and the what and the why together. And that's what we covered in that section. But today, around people, we are looking at actually overcoming what happens if you don't get the right people inside an organization. And if you look at on the right hand side of the slide, you can see the things that basically we're trying to overcome with Powered by Change. So if you don't have the clarity of purpose and the integration of purpose that's been specified and then assimilated across the business, you can have great people, great products, great processes, but you end up with massive confusion due to the lack of purpose. If you have, if we skip the people, we'll get to that. If you don't have the right product in place, you can have a brilliant purpose, excellent people and great processes, but actually go bankrupt due to the fact you haven't got the right products or services. If you don't have the right processes, then everyone gets massively frustrated because no one knows exactly what to do and when and how. With the people, with the second blade, what we have here is something which is way more personal in terms of the business success, and that is actually to overcome the resistance. And overcoming resistance is my view of Powered by Change in this part was to achieve. And a lot of the issues with people in business, or getting the right people in business, is, funnily enough, down to how we actually survive in our comfort zones. And I don't know if you can see on the slide, there's on the bottom left-hand side, there's this picture of kind of our comfort zone or your comfort zone, and then where the magic happens. And of course, it's a kind of a known concept that we don't tend to be able to excel from where our comfort zone is. By the way, can I just mention that someone has drawn on the screen, so there's blue pen on the right hand side of the screen, blue squiggles. So I don't know whether that's me or someone's just done that. So Chris, if you can look into that as well, that'd be great.
I thought you were sketching. Sorry about that.
No, that's not me. So if we can delete the squiggles, that'd be great, because it's messed up all the slides. But so we have our comfort zone, and of course, there are people inside organizations that are really, really good at, thank you, whoever undid that, appreciate that. We can carry on doing things as normal as much as we like, but actually that's not going to bring about the best possible success. And I've often quoted a guy called Dan Gardner and his book called The Science and Politics of Fear or Risk. And he speaks about how fear and understanding on this slide are inversely proportional. And of course, this is one of the reasons why people are resistant inside an organization, because they just don't know what it is that they're supposed to do or supposed to understand. And I've also observed that sometimes there's companies with this type of structure. Sometimes when I've shown this on stage with the chief idea killer at the top of this slide that you're looking at now, and if you're not, please message me. On the bottom right hand side, you've got the manager of new growth ideas that's vacant. It's kind of a humorous moment in some of the keynotes that I've done, but actually the truth is this is actually quite a common circumstance. There's one particular mobile network in the UK that actually did have a VP of No. And when I asked him his real title, he said he was the head of innovation, and which I felt was real shocking. And so we notice these things in all organizations, and these things need to be overcome. I'm a fan of using this particular model of 6 steps, of which the area in the middle is the area of experimentation. Now, in business, people are sometimes asked to come up with facts, like what's going to happen, what the ROI is going to be, what the business case is going to be, what the expected outcome is going to be. And that's fine, but the problem is if we're looking to do things that are innovative and different from the past, then we can't start with facts. What we have to start with is speculation, where there's a high uncertainty and potentially high complexity. But unless we actually start on the top right of this slide, we can't get into the experimentation part in the middle, which is the explorations, scenarios, and projections. And it's from the speculations leading into that area of experimentation that generate the predictions that then, through execution, can result in facts. So my observation is that what we're doing is not speculating enough. When we're asked to generate more and more facts inside a business case, what we aren't talking about is increased learning. And there's this saying that fail fast and fail often. I thoroughly disagree with that. It sounds like a really bad business move. I believe in learn fast and learn often. And if you were to use a model of 6 steps to do the learning fast and learning often, this is what I would suggest is useful. And there are many companies inside the Powered by Change book that I refer to that are using this model, ranging from Gore Creative Technologies through to even the massive large branding companies like Procter & Gamble, which are constantly speculating, exploring, creating scenarios and projections, resulting in predictions and facts. But equally, you can do this as a person. You don't need to be a massive multinational conglomerate corporate. You can actually be an individual who actually is lighting small fires and seeing which parts actually feel right, instinctively, which parts actually that you speculate on can be worthy of further exploration and further scenarios and further projections and predictions. What this means, what this map is that you're looking at right now, is a map of evolution. This is how to evolve. Someone's just come on mute, but we'll take questions in the chat window, and please do put yourself back on mute.
I'm chasing that one down.
So this is a map of how we can evolve moving forward. But then what you may feel is, well, actually, we've got a bit of a paradox on our hands, because at the same time as we should be doing all this exploring stuff, we also need to be exploiting the current. Yeah, it's fine kind of speculating and experimenting, but what happens if we also need to be doing our business as usual? And this is something that people in businesses have huge resistance over, because they're trying to solve exploitation versus exploration as if it's a problem. But in fact, this isn't a problem, it's a paradox. Problems have a binary answer, tend to be, but paradoxes have a balance. So as people in an organization ourselves, but also people individually, and then managing people or working with people, we need to find ways of actually balancing the paradox of exploitation versus exploration. And in this great illustration by the wonderful Dave Burse, who's part of my Thought Expansion Network, he's drawn a oil tanker and speedboat metaphor here that I've used commonly for many years now, in as much as that our existing organizations tend to be more like oil tankers. Like they shoot off into the distance, they go relatively slowly into the distance, they can turn at maybe 1 degree per year, but we need the speedboats to explore the horizon and come back, and explore the horizon and come back. The danger is And this is kind of like the paradox that we've got. We've got the exploitation, which is the speedboat. We've got the exploration, which is, the exploitation, which is the oil tanker, and the exploration, which is the speedboat. We need to balance these two, because what sometimes happens is that the speedboat gets run over by the oil tanker. So the oil tanker looks at the speedboat, and the speedboat's full of red numbers, costs, and there's no fact based to it. There's no certainty. And so the oil tanker's CFO tends to say, this needs to stop, or the CSO says that strategically it'd be actually better to double down on the stuff we're good at. And we need to do both at once. And I've learned that in terms of how to enable people to not be resistant of this paradox, there needs to be two activities in place. The first is we need to get the most senior stakeholder buy-in that we can. That means getting to the very top of the organization, if that's the most senior stakeholder, and enabling to them, or rather illustrating to them the paradox and getting them to accept it, or at least finding out if they accept the paradox. Because if they accept that the paradox exists, that they need to be thinking slow and fast, they need to be moving slow and fast, they need to be exploiting and exploring, then you can move on to step 2, which is financial redesign. And that's actually adjusting the P&L, that the red numbers of speedboats aren't actually polluting the sea of black numbers of the oil tanker through the perspective of the oil tanker in terms of pollution. We need to separate the P&L. Otherwise, what happens is that the red numbers of experimentation, the cost base, look dangerous. But you can't actually do that. You can't separate the P&L unless you actually have the senior stakeholder buy-in in point 1. So they're in order. Senior stakeholder buy-in, financial redesign, P&L redesign. And they're the only ways that I've seen that you can effectively bring about addressing the paradox, i.e. finding the balance of that paradox. In terms of people inside an organization looking at what's going on around us now. So remember, what we're addressing here is the people part of our windmill, the people blade. And what we're doing in that, in Powered by Change, is overcoming resistance. And so when we are in an organization or individually, we may well cling tight onto existing business models, onto existing thoughts, our existing plans, the things, well, we always said we were going to do this, but we planned to do that, and we discussed this. And that's all academically interesting. But the truth of the matter is that over time, due to the rate of change, we actually need to evolve. We need to evolve as people. We need to evolve in our thinking. We need to evolve our business models. We need to do that because the rate of change is accelerating all the time, but we don't. As people, we tend not to. Some of us do, and we are seen as constantly changing, dangerously in flux, or always in transition, hard to predict. That's called evolution. Resistance, however, is clinging tight onto something that you thought was going to happen and then didn't, and then actually being upset or angry about that. And in fact, if we look at that in the world that we live in the DNA of disruption, we have always instances of fundamental changes that happen. And then the next thing that happens is that there's a low threat rating. We as people in organizations or as individuals, we tend to think that our business models and our thinking and our mindset is still okay, even though we may even be aware of the rate of change increasing. But then the third part and final part of the DNA of disruption is there's an inflection point into the mainstream. And when that inflection point happens, it's like a light switch. It goes from something that may have been a minor issue into maybe something that we build a wall against rather than build a windmill. We try and resist the winds of change to such an extent that we build a great big wall, and in that wall we create structures that stop things. We create restricting structures. We make things complicated for the people around us. We try and stop evolution by being awkward. But the truth of it is that nothing can stop the rate of change and evolution. And so when the inflection point happens, it's super, super painful. So it's really, really important for us as people, individually and in businesses, to actually be powered by change but be aware of the DNA of disruption, aware of the fact that you cannot stop the change and you cannot resist the fact that change has to happen to what we do and what we think. And in fact, this guy here on the screen, if you can see it, is a guy called Hon Lik, who invented the patents for the electronic cigarettes. And he went to the tobacco companies and he said, can you maybe work with us? And maybe there's a way of working together. And the tobacco companies laughed him out of the offices and said, we're not interested. But now they pay hundreds of millions of dollars for the rights to the electronic cigarette patents. My point is this: what do you think the tobacco companies' people should have thought when they saw this type of innovation? And it leads me to ask, what is your e-cigarette? What is your e-cigarette? What would it be that would fundamentally change what you do if it came along? Because I guarantee you that if you're not thinking about it, someone definitely is, and they are building it faster than you may be thinking about it. And it's almost as if we don't necessarily choose to change, and when we have to change, we can't change because we didn't choose to change when we could have. And this is the thing that we need to, we need to enable the people around us and ourselves to be comfortable with the discomfort of change. I think that we have a cost-benefit ratio, a cost-benefit equation here, where the benefit of change as people needs to outweigh how much it would cost to change or the cost of not changing. And I wish so much that more people around us would really truly concentrate on the structure of that saying. These aren't just PR statements. These aren't motivational statements. These are structural points that can determine our entire future. The cost of not changing could be absolutely horrendous, but if we're emotionally tied to something not changing and evolving, sometimes we miss the fact that the cost of not changing would be horrendous. We'd almost prefer to suffer than change because we haven't actually done this equation. It's fascinating and pandemic. You see, what we're talking about here is an alternative ROI, not an ROI which is return on investment. This is actually talking about risk of inaction. This is real risk, not that happens to other people, that happens to you. The actual risk of inaction. Even if you've had the signs that you need to actually act, and act openly and collaboratively and in alignment, we still sometimes tend not to. And in fact, an alternative ROI is equating what that risk of inaction is, not just materially in pounds, shillings and pence and euros and cents, but in terms of our emotional well-being and our overall happiness. Life is short. So we need to equate the risk of inaction quite tangibly. This is something that I hope we can help our people ascertain. But as Kurt von Hammerstein-Eckert said in his theory of army formation, there are four kind of types of people, and they tend to come in twos. So for instance, you have the lazy and the stupid, and Kurt von Hammerstein-Eckert said that they're the people that should be troops. He also said that the people who are diligent and clever should be an admin, which is strange actually, because a lot of those people who are diligent and clever go into various different other boxes. And the lazy and clever, he said, should be the leaders, and the diligent and stupid should be avoided. Now, my version of this is somewhat different in business, but it's kind of, again, based on a 2x2 grid. And my theory of business formation is as people with will and no will, skill and no skill. And in fact, the people with the will and the skill need to lead. And if you don't enable those people to lead, what they do is they leave. And what they do is they leave and they join a competitor, and then they lead. So what happens with the people with the will and the skill, if they are somewhat resisted against, if they are not worked with, if they are not treated respectfully, what happens is they leave. They drop you like a stone. If they have the will and the skill and they are not actually enabled to lead, they always leave. Then you have people with will and no skill, or less skill, they're people who should learn. And I haven't used the word train because training is what you do with dogs. Learning is what happens with humans, not something to humans, but with humans. And the people with less skill, but still have the will, they need to learn. Why? Because otherwise they'll leave. And then they become learners in the competitor, and then in the competitor environment, they become leaders. So you're double screwed. Then you have people with no will and no skill, of course, should be avoided. But the majority of the workforce, the majority are in the top right-hand side. The people with the skill, but no or less will. Gartner Employee Engagement Survey says that there's 74% of an average workforce in that. And my view is that they need to be aligned with. We need to understand people, the way that would actually enable them to become more willful and acting on their points of resonance. Now, those in the webinar last week would have remembered I actually referred to this point in terms of our alignment. But my take on this that I would like to use for the end of our webinar now is actually around the way to spot the right type of people in an organization. Now we've got our blade one of purpose. We understand what it is that we're doing, who it is that we are, what it is that we're doing, and why it is that we're doing it. We understand that in our purpose. And in the first webinar, I went through a system of gaining the elevation to find that purpose. And if you missed that webinar or didn't see the video, it's in the first part of the book, and you've got the book. So that's the purpose part. Let's assume now we've got the purpose part. To use that purpose part to find the right people is a way of translating our purpose into human words, human understanding, and the creation of a belief syntax that attracts people to that purpose. When we've done that, and I would suggest, by the way, that we spend little time with people who aren't aligned with that, a lot of time with people who are aligned to that, then we have two blades of our windmill. And the only thing that's needed next, the only things, are the products and service that we offer, or the processes, the frameworks of how we do these things. But the truth be told, if we've got the purpose and the people, we are in great shape to find our products and services that we need and to create the processes that we need. Because you can create the best products on God's earth, but if you haven't got the right purpose and the right people, then I'm afraid you have all kinds of trouble on your hands. So that's a little insight, a little bonus piece of content from my side. I'm going to look at the chat window, and I noticed that there's no questions so far. But if anyone does have any questions, then please do ask. I'm here for you for as long as you need, within reason. So please do tap away in the chat window. And whilst I'm waiting for you to ask any questions, I'll just cover a couple more points on one of these slides that I just want to go back to and add some more colour to, and that is this here. So if you have a situation where you have people who are confused of what to do next or confused about the changes, my suggestion is you actually create an ongoing learning environment like an organizational school where you are all together without hierarchy trying to learn about the stuff that you don't know. And I mentioned this in the purpose part around the 98%. Obviously there's 1% of stuff you know, 1% of stuff you don't know, and 98% of stuff you don't know. And on this slide, the DNA of disruption, the blue line, the blue curve that's going up, that's something that we actually have a chance to, at any one time, to really truly understand. If you find resistance to that, and I find that in companies that I've worked in, that I have now, that I've been involved in the past, what we do is we look through our lens of what we think should be the case, or we think is the plan, or we think is our opinion, or think is our course, and we spend little time trying to understand the other side of that. And what we do is we're trying to build a wall and resist and protect what we have. Whereas if we actually understood the evolution that's happening, then there's actually upsides of understanding that, because we can then align what we're doing, or even if we want to stay in exactly the same lane, we can see if we can align that with the new. Whereas what happens if we resist it, and we resist the winds of change, then everything falls apart and we end up with something that's much different than what we even felt comfortable in. So that's something that I would say on this point. And it's, I don't know whether you can tell the tangibility of this point to me, because this, it's like the Powered by Change, as I was writing it, I felt as if it's lessons that I wish, I'm glad I don't have any regrets. I'm glad that I've gone through the lessons that I've gone through and still continuing to learn through. But and so I don't wish I'd known all this stuff beforehand, because otherwise I wouldn't have learned it. And it's about the journey rather than destination. So I think that it's just, this is a book of observations of trends in terms of our behavior and our mindset. And actually, from writing it and being involved in companies that in equal parts suffer from the things that I've spoken about and excel in the things I've spoken about. It's one of those, it's weird that even some of the people who can observe these realities still resist the realities. And I still do, as a human and a business person. I still have that fragility, that frailty, and the difference of kind of the knowing and the doing. You know, you kind of know this stuff. You know that you should be thinking in a certain way, but then when you execute, you don't necessarily execute in that way. But what I know for sure is that on the first graph I showed, it should be on your screen right now, the way to decrease and remove confusion is to establish the most resonant purpose. The way to alleviate the biggest resistance amongst human beings inside an organization and privately is by enabling the right people to be involved who resonate with that purpose. The way to enable the most profitability and commercial upside is to enable the product to be created by the people who have that resonant purpose. And the way to remove all frustration of any processes is to enable the frameworks that enable the purpose and the people and the products to grow. And that's what Powered by Change is about. And so in the next session, we'll talk about the product part, because you know what? Sometimes we need to make some money. And so we're going to talk about the commercial products and services next week. Chris, I'm going to hand over to you.
We just had a question come in from Kevin, but as you were talking there, I had a personal question in lieu of Kevin's question about productive paranoia. And you mentioned that in terms of leadership and inspiring to be a leader. Do you have any insight or experience on the pressures of someone who is a new leader or coming in a new leadership role, on how to use productive paranoia in this kind of quote unquote first 100 days of their new position? I mean, that'd be really interesting to learn more about.
Yeah, in Powered by Change, I actually have a 3-step process, which I will allude to now, but please, in your book, you can see the 3-step process mapped out. It's very simple, but if I was to take one of those 3 parts, I would actually use the word investigation. Those are the 3 parts of the productive paranoia triad, our triumvirate, our eyes, the illiterate eyes. And the investigation part is the one in the first 100 days that I think should be instilled by any new chief exec or new manager of any kind. And it's investigating the stuff we don't know in terms of what could disrupt us. And of course, in the first 100 days, everyone's coming up saying, actually, nothing is going to disrupt us because everything's fantastic and everything's great. And therefore, there's no risk whatsoever. But actually, a good leader would turn that around and say, you know what, I want you to break this company. You can't get fired. Actually, I'll reward you for doing it. So that's what I would suggest. Now, Kevin says, can you suggest a few ways of helping to break down staff resistance change and equally encourage them to look outwardly at positive change? I think I may have just mentioned one way, which is in terms of the investigation of of the potential disruption. But I'm going to take one level up from here. It is critical to understand the reason why there is resistance to change. And if it is one of fear of the unknown, that is battled with by understanding and learning. That's the quid pro quo of fear of the unknown. If it is comfort, then what I've used is scenario planning. So for those who are just comfortable doing what they're doing, I then work with them to understand what different scenarios could look like, normally on a 2x2 grid. So I would say, okay, let's say, everything's going to become more like this and everything's going to become less like this. What are our scenarios that we should explore to look at what would happen outside of the comfort zone, and where could we find new comfort in one of those scenarios? Because then what happens is they can align themselves to a comfort in the future if they did certain actions. So it's kind of like a paying it forward comfort zone scenario planning. If the thing that they don't, so we've had fear of the unknown, we've got comfort zones, but if they have uncertainty, so it's not fear, it's not comfort, it's that they're just uncertain. They just don't know what to do next. That I address with this 6-step system. Memorize this. You'll get this deck, you'll get this video, screenshot this, take a picture of this. The people who are uncertain should feel okay about being uncertain and placed at the top right-hand side of this. They should be enabled to speculate uncertainly. They should, however complex that is, they should be enabled to experiment in terms of explorations through to projections. This experimentation there is something that they should be invited to do. Every single time I've met a member of staff who is uncertain, I then ask them if they've been given the permission to experiment, and they say no. Every time. For almost 30 years. So that's my answer to that. Chris, I think back over to you, because I think we've exhausted, I must have covered all the potential questions when I was speaking. So I'm going to take that as a personal success. Oh no, hold on. I knew Arnold was typing all that time. Arnold says, I keep wondering if purposeful people needs to comfort. Oh, great. I love this question. If the wrong people are in the lead, you'll never tackle purpose in a meaningful way. Consequently, you won't be able to follow up the other players. Where people comes into play, then I agree. How can this be tackled is having the right people in the precondition, otherwise we're doomed. Great. Funnily enough, I answer this in the book, and I believe that the reason the blades are in order is because ontologically there's energy, then there's an interpretation of that energy, which is our purpose, and then you can align the right people, you can get the right products, and with the right processes you win. If you start with the right people, the question is, yes, but what energetic compound is inside them and within them? What is the telos? And this is a study of teleology, 2,000-3,000 year old study of teleology, which should be mandatory now, not learning about how many wives King Henry VIII had. It'd be far more important to understand teleology. And teleology is the ancient study of purpose. And in that ontology, what we start with is what is the meaning and the purpose? What is the ratio, the rationale, the reason? What is the quantus, the quantum? What is the amount of matter? Not Qantas in terms of the airline, which they dropped the U confusingly to make it spelt incorrectly. But what is that? What is that first? Because then you can align the right people who resonate with that, the people who also share that. So this isn't getting one person with a purpose. This is the establishment of teleology and the telos, and then the alignment of resonant people, and then the execution in resonant products with resonant people in the outside world of the consumer landscape in a process that is perpetual. That's what the Powered by Change is about. That's why purpose starts first, because it does. You're welcome. Okay, Chris, over to you.
All righty. Thanks for that. Yeah, as I'm just wrapping things up. If a question still is lingering, please do chat in the chat window with your written version of your question. As many of you know, this is the second out of 4 webinars that are being recorded. We'll share with you both the deck and the URL post-event. As most of you are individuals and have bought individual books, Powered by Change, that was kind of your golden ticket to get into these webinars. But there are also other opportunities to share more, shall we say, exclusive or personal discussions like this with Jonathan and your team, or with your groups of teams, your organization. If you go to poweredbychange.com, you'll see a couple of other bundles out there. One's called the Team Bundle, where when you purchase 10 books over us here at the 10 Network, we will ship those books to you, and then you'll have access to invite 9 other of your team members to a one-on-one private webinar where Jonathan will engage with you in his traditional way of doing research and seeing where you guys are from an organizational standpoint, and get into a much more, shall we say, specific or custom verticalized discussion around where some of your opportunities or challenges may lay in your industry. But that's more of a private webinar. So 10 of your colleagues, or 9 of your colleagues and yourself with Jonathan direct for an hour webinar, and that's called the Team Bundle. You can find that on poweredbychange.com. As well as we have something called the Business Box. And when you order 100 books over us here at 10, we will engage you to have Jonathan meet with a select group with you face-to-face on site at your location. So do check those bundles out. They're on the Powered by Change site. All of your requests or inquiries about how that actually works at a logistical level essentially can be answered by writing a quick email at pbc@10.io, and we'll get back to you on that. Okay, I think we have another question, Jonathan, from Joseph.
In which case I will answer Joseph's questions and say goodbye at the same time. The question that Joseph asked is, where and when do you draw the line before having to leave the organization when it comes to getting the support from a higher stakeholder, but you still don't receive it and they don't seem to get it, but you can see the possibilities? I will answer that in a very straightforward way. You leave the nanosecond that you have everything that you needed from that organization, whether that is the contacts within the law, within your agreement, within your contract, the contacts, the amount of money that you needed to earn to give you the freedom to then move on. But you should be merciless in this, because if you account your life, if you actually add up your life, how much time you have left, if you add it up in months, it will shock you. If you put it on a spreadsheet and you have 24 months, so 24 rows is 2 years, obviously, and then you pan out how many years for the average life expectancy of your gender in your country, and you put it on a spreadsheet, your spreadsheet will be that big, and you'll be able to see the amount of months that you've got left. And then the question is filling in how many of those months you want to spend around people who don't get it. And you choose. You choose how many months you want to spend. And then you leave the second that you've reached the amount of months that you want to spend with people who are not aligned. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're different. And you've evolved differently. And what then, if you can cut and run in a polite and respectful way that everyone is still in balance and is still polite and is still pleasant, then you win, because it's a really small world. If, however, you see that spreadsheet and you notice that the months thing isn't going to work and the resonance isn't there, and then you actually make it extraordinarily difficult and costly and unpleasant, then karma continues to catch up with you, and you stay up in this hamster wheel of hell. Whereas the right way forward is to assess and then evolve as you continue to do, and move on politely with a smile, and hope that those people also find their path too, because none of us are right, none of us are wrong. We're just all on different paths. We're all fighting our own wars, and we need to be respectful of that, because we're all part of one universe, part of one nature. We're all part of one organism. So we need to, and it's a small world. There you go. Thank you very much, everyone.